Hello everyone and welcome back to the Body Wisdom series. I am Sonja Courtis and this is the lovely Jodie Ross.
Hi.
And we're finally up to episode 3 talking about cancer. Now, we're going to do a quick recap today, aren't we, Jodie, on what we've covered in the first 2 episodes, and then we're going to go into what we're going to be covering today. So just as a reminder, episode 1, we talked about cancer as an adaptive process in the body, that it's not an accident, that it's there for a reason, and it's all part of the body's beautiful processes to try and get us back into some sort of equilibrium and state of balance. Do you want to add anything in regards to that particular episode?
Oh no, that's what the first one was, just to really start to have a look at the fact that if the cancer's there, if the cells are there, if any symptoms are there really, but we're talking about cancer today, that there's a reason why the body's adapting for those reasons. And today we're going to get a little bit more specific and look at, well, what is the why?
Yeah. And then episode 2, which was amazing with lovely Emma, was all about the gut microbiome and the importance of that being balanced in order to support healing and overall well-being, really. I thought that episode was mind-blowing. So today's episode, right, so I've just scrolled through my notes now, I have to go back to the beginning. Do you want to start by talking about what we're covering today?
Yeah, but I also just want to say just what we spoke about a second ago, Sonja, that everything we discussed today is coming from a place of love and just sharing what we know with you, because sometimes you don't know what you just don't know. And I mean that until you hear new information, sometimes we just don't know that it exists. So when Sonja and I both learnt this information, it was pretty mind-blowing for us, so much so that obviously it's the direction that we really took with what we're doing with our work and helping people. But understanding, we're just offering things from a new perspective. And Sonja, we were just talking before we started this webinar that we would just ask you to, I guess, reserve, not get rid of it because you still need it, but reserve what you need or park it to the side for a minute, everything you think you know about cancer for now, and just listen with an open mind and an open heart to possibilities that actually might be, that we discuss, that might be able to help you or somebody that you love.
Thank you for that. So this episode, what we're going to be looking at, I'm just looking at my notes here just to remind me that we're going to be looking at the purpose of the cancer and the extra cells and why they are there. We're going to give you some examples of breast cancer and possible root causes for that, and also lung cancers and root causes for those as well. And we're also going to discuss briefly secondary cancers, and then what you can do to empower yourself to create health, and how you can potentially heal from cancer if you have it. And we're also, I think that's it for that, isn't it? I think that's all we're covering. So we're going to get into it. So, righty-ho, what is the purpose of cancer and why is it there? We touched on this in episode 1, didn't we, Jodie?
Yeah.
It's an adaptive process.
Yeah. And I guess just to explain what we mean by that. So, from a biocompass perspective, or what we're looking at is whenever anyone's got any symptom in the body, but we are going to make it more specific for cancer today, is we always look at the adaptation that the body's doing. And what we do there is we go, okay, so if someone has cancer in the breast, the breast is an organ, but then we'd look at, okay, where's the location? Because it's really important to know where is it, because then we can look at, well, what's the biological purpose of that tissue in the body? And if it needed to adapt to have more cells, then why? And that, I guess that's what we're really looking at, because coming from a perspective of the body doesn't make mistakes, it's always trying to come back into balance. It's not random. It's not even unlucky that it's there, that we're looking at, okay, it's just simply an adaptive process. And we're not trying to say it's not a distressing adaptive process, because it can be for lots of people, but there's a reason that the body's adapting. And some of that is environmental. There's no doubt that some symptoms are because of environmental factors and where we are and, lifestyle choices. However, what we're going to look at is more from emotions and beliefs perspective, and literally what's going on in the psyche that could be contributing to creating those adapted cells in the body.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So now we cover this. We did discuss this in episode 1, but there are 6 stressors that can lead to the body needing to be going through adaptive processes. As you've just mentioned, there's environmental. There's also stress, beliefs, which is a huge one, emotions, lifestyle habits, and organs as well as the environmental. Now, we want to talk about today what a stressor is and how. And then your individual experience can be a determinant of why that particular cancer is showing up in your body.
Yeah.
So, for instance, your body is adapting to these stresses that you've experienced. So, for instance, if you've had a trauma that is potentially lying unresolved in your psyche and in your emotional body and in your mind, then that is going to have an effect on how your body responds over time. So it's not that everyone who's a smoker is going to get lung cancer, and it's not that everyone who I don't know, had a mother who had breast cancer is going to get breast cancer necessarily. It's all about your individual experiences in life and what you have experienced. It's going to determine how your body responds.
Yeah. And I think that's a really important thing to preface what we're about to say, because Sonja and we are going to give you examples in a minute, but and we're going to give examples of scenarios. And what's really important to understand is it's never the event that necessarily that someone goes through that is necessarily going to cause any symptom. It's what did the event mean to you? And what we mean by that is perception. It's how the event has affected you and how long for that can then contribute to symptoms. And, you know, Sonja just mentioned the 6 root causes, but all of them really, they all come down to being a stressor. So whether it's environmental, emotional, or lifestyle, it's what stress is being placed on the body to make it react in that way. And so that's sort of where we're headed. So we just want to give a couple of examples on perception and just how we could look at, before we even, you know, get into actual conditions, just perception. So do you want me to talk about that one?
Because should we quickly mention about Udins, just so people understand?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, so I'll do that part, and then you give the example of the child, because you know that one quite well and came up with that. So just preface this first by a particular emotional stressor. It could be what we call a trauma, which could be a big T, a big trauma, big life events, or little ones. But again, a perception will determine whether or not you see that as a big trauma or a little trauma. But they are events that occur in your life that have 4 sort of categories, like 4 determinants, and those are, we call it a UDIN, UDIN. The first thing is that it's unexpected. So the event is unexpected. Now, even if you're in an abusive relationship where, you know, you are constantly being ridiculed emotionally or physically, you still never know when that event's going to occur on any given day. So it's there's an unexpected nature to it. And then, of course, we have obvious unexpected, which is, you know, earthquakes or car accidents or something like that. So it's unexpected, and then it's dramatic. So it feels to you, based on your perception, quite dramatic at the time or at the moment of the event, which also explains why one event that might happen to you feels very dramatic to you, but to another person, they'd shrug it off and go, oh, I don't.
What are you worried about?
Yeah, exactly. And again, and often that might be because of what you've experienced in your past, because of your belief systems, which we have mentioned already is a big determinant in why, you know, you feel the way you feel, or you have certain things occur in your body. So it's unexpected, it's dramatic, and then it's isolating. So what isolating really means, and you can probably add to this, because I find sometimes, Jodie, I'm like, oh, how do I explain this? At the time that the event occurs, you almost feel like no one gets what you're going through. It's like your event. You could be in a room full of people, but it's your event, your perception, how you're feeling in that moment. It feels very isolating, like no one gets what I'm going through here. Do you think that's how you would explain
that's how I describe it too. Either no one understands me, I feel like I'm on my own, or literally no one is there for you. But it's isolating in some way, as in, oh God, I don't know what to do here.
And then that adds into the N of UDIN, which is no tools or strategies at the time to deal with it. So it's almost like fight, flight, freeze. but we don't sometimes deal with it in the best way that we could have, because we're overwhelmed by adrenaline, or we're overwhelmed by shock.
We're in
and
shock.
stress. Yeah,
It's a shock moment.
Yeah. So it's that,
And sorry.
No, you know, keep going. Yeah, you're right.
Well, that's what a Jodie is. It's a shock moment. So when somebody has any symptoms, that when we're working with someone from a biocompass perspective, we're looking for, well, what are your shock moments? What's still being stored in your psyche? And we were, we've discussed it in our stress and anxiety webinars when we talked about memory imprints, that when if things happen to us, especially if they've been really meaningful for us, and in this case, we're giving it the word of trauma or stressful event or Jodie, what we're really looking for is, okay, what are those shock moments along the way that have created memory imprints for you that your body could be adapting to? And it will adapt with either behavior or with physical symptoms. So, because the body's adapting all the time anyway. But when we're looking at big symptoms like this, I guess we're looking for either bigger shock moments or bigger Jodie moments, or ones that have been prolonged and just get going on and on and on that haven't been resolved. Yeah. Because big symptoms mean that there's still some stuff there that needs to be dealt with.
Potentially has been resolved, but not fully, or is going through a resolution too, because as we know, Jodie, some cancers are actually in the stress phase, and others are in the resolution phase around those themes. So we're just going to give you an example of how this plays out in terms of perception, because it's really important to understand this, because again, this all comes back to what we're trying to teach you here, that how we address cancer is going to be based on your individual experience of life, not a cookie cutter, one size fits all approach. So Jodie's going to give a wonderful experience of 2 children in a classroom. And
it's a really good one to explain perception. So imagine you've got 2 little kids, they're both in class, but you've got one kid who loves attention, loves it when everyone laughs at him, loves being in the limelight. And then you've got another child that might be a little bit more shy, doesn't have as much self-confidence, and hates it when people laugh at him. Now, imagine you've got those 2 kids in the class and the teacher asks them a question and they get it wrong. And the kids in the class laugh. So for child 1 who loves attention, would we think that would be a stressful or a shock moment for him? Probably not, which means that would his cells really need to adapt in much of a way? He probably wouldn't get that big strike of rush of adrenaline, the heart palpitations and, that real nervousness, because to him it would be funny, cool, everyone's laughing at me. And then if you think about it from the other kid who, I guess, the one that isn't as confident, doesn't like being put on the spot, and he's totally humiliated because he's got the question wrong and people are laughing at him, would we think that could be a stressful or a shock moment for him? Absolutely. The event's the same, but the perception of those 2 kids based on their personality and their beliefs about themselves as well will change what it means to them. And for child 2, he's going to be much more likely to adapt in terms of what his cells are doing. Maybe not for prolonged, if that wasn't a big scenario, but he would get the rapid heartbeat and probably the tears and the stomach churning and all of that sort of stuff. And if something like that happened enough, or if it was a really big moment for that child, then that can lead to bigger symptoms, more likely to be, things like anxiety and, beliefs about himself in that scenario. But that's really just to give you an example of, you've got 2 people with the same event, but it's experienced so differently depending on what it means to them, their beliefs about themselves as well.
Yeah.
And I guess... Oh, sorry, darling.
That's why we're really hammering this whole thing home today. We really want to get this across. Perception and beliefs are so unique and individual. It's what you make it mean.
Yeah, because that's what determines how your cells adapt. If it doesn't mean anything to you, your cells won't adapt. Or if they do, it'll be a short burst and then it's done. Our cells are adapting all day, every day. The other example that we talked about is, imagine you've got 2 women that have gone through a nasty breakup or a divorce. Okay, and you've got woman 1 who is, she's strong, she's resilient, She doesn't mind having a bit of an argument. She's just rapt as anything to get out of the family home because it never meant that much to her anyway. And then you've got woman, did I call her woman two? I meant woman one.
Yeah.
Woman two, imagine she too is going through a nasty breakup. Doesn't like confrontation. It makes her feel really intimidated and humiliated. And the fact that she's had to leave the family home has been devastating for her because that was just something that was really, really important to her. So she feels a huge sense of loss, right? Scenario is the same. Both women have been through a nasty breakup, had to leave the family home. But one woman, it's a total relief for her. It's good. Let me just get out of here. But the other woman, that's been a big deal.
Yeah.
So you look at those two women and think, okay, so adaptation wise, is woman one likely her cells need to adapt in a big way? Probably not. You know, apart from in the moment where it might have been stressful having the arguments and yes, the change and moving out and all of that sort of stuff. It's a good thing for her. She's really happy about it. So her cells are not going to have any length of prolonged activity in adaptation. Whereas woman two, it's been a much bigger deal for her. Stress has been high. She's devastated. She's had to leave and she's experienced a real sense of loss. You know, is she going to be more likely for the cells to adapt? Probably. Doesn't necessarily mean she's going to get cancer, but it just means that in you've got two women experiencing the same sort of event, but what it means to them and how they experience it is so different based on their perception and what it means to them, and probably also the beliefs about themselves and their position in the world.
Yeah. And this is our lovely segue into our first example of a type of cancer that we're going to tie in this perception and experience and the reason that a breast cancer could occur. As Jodie's already mentioned, but just because you've experienced this doesn't mean you're going to get breast cancer, you know, so that we just keep reminding you of that. We always, with everything in BioCompass, always consider the biological purpose of the organ. What is the purpose of that organ? Because when you look at linking the themes or experiences that someone's gone through to that organ, I'm yet to, with any single one of my cancer clients, not see this happening, not see these themes and stressors playing out, especially around perception and beliefs. So we go to, what is the biological function of the breast? It is to nurture.
Yeah, that's why we have it. That's why, you know, whether we breastfeed or not, or whether we necessarily ever have children or not, the purpose of the female breast is our nurture center. It's there to nurture.
Yeah. And so when we're considering breast cancers with a client, we're always going to be looking at themes around having an experience where someone or something they were nurturing is no longer there, or we've got breast ducts and breast glands as well. So there's two different types of themes for those, two different separate. But we want to be looking at any emotional triggers, udins, traumas, ongoing, potentially unresolved, or starting to be resolved, depending on whether it's breast or ducts and glands or ducts, in which, excuse me, there is a nurturing conflict. Jodie, you're going to have to take over for a second.
Sure. Yeah. So when we're looking at here, right? When we're looking at if somebody has breast cancer, what we're really looking for, and I would encourage you to do it if you're in this position, or if you're experiencing any other cancer, think about the location it is in the body and think about, okay, what's the biological purpose of that tissue in my body? So when we're looking at breasts, we know that the breast generally is our nurture center as a female, but then we get even more specific and we look at, okay, where's the location of the tumors? Is it in the breast ducts, or is it in the breast glands? Because both of those tissues have a different function. The breast gland is what creates the milk, and the breast ducts are what actually, they're like the ducts that the milk travels through. They're actually like the delivery person of the milk. So they're like the milkman. So the glands make the milk, the ducts deliver it. They've got a different function. So that means that they are going to have a different cell adaptation as well. And we can get very specific with that and look at, okay, so we know generally the theme is around nurture, but how does it change? Why would the breast glands need to have more cells? And why would the breast ducts need to have more cells? If we come from a perspective of, there's a reason that cancer or those tumours are there in the first place.
So do we want to explain the two things for the, so breast ducts, and I have worked with clients with introductory cancer, and really interestingly, the themes for this cancer were really quick to find because the woman still had a lot of energy around this theme. So for the breast glands, it is a worry, fight, conflict. So what that means in relation to a worry, fight, conflict, in relation to a mate, a child, your mother, your home or nest, you've experienced excessive worry in relation to one of those things, something you nurture, because people nurture their homes and they nurture their animals, or nurture their children. But at the same time, you're worried and concerned with the well-being of a loved one, and it is about pets as well, or you're worried about the nest or home itself, but at the same time, you're fighting for that thing. Great example, child being bullied at school. You're worried for them because they are your child and they're being bullied, but you're also going into that school to fight with the teachers or the other parents to try and get some justice for that child. So you've got the two things happening. A really common one here in Christchurch, and I'm predicting we're going to see an increase of breast, this particular type of cancer, is because of the earthquakes. People are worried because they've lost their homes, but they're also fighting with the Earthquake Commission or insurers to get their affairs sorted around this.
Yeah.
Now, everyone out there who's watching this, doesn't mean that if you had that particular issue with your house, that you're going to go and get this cancer. But if it's a very strong energy around it, if it's a very strong theme that's running, then this could be a trigger. If you get breast cancer, to be then going, what have I been, this is, remember, glands, what has been happening in my life where I've been worried about something and I've been fighting for it.
And remember, we're not just looking for little worries, right? So it doesn't mean, and it's not even if you've been through this, it means if you are somebody who has breast cancer in this area, then we would go through an analysis process and we'd look at, okay, what have been your shock moments? You know, where your udins, and we would go through our process. But what we're looking for is those moments that you've been excessively worried about things, because what happens is the breast glands then will go, right, how do I support you with that? What do I need to better help you nurture whatever it is that you're worried about? So that's when the cells build up during the breast during the stress phase, because it's trying to literally give you, and this has got nothing to do with breastfeeding, it's just got everything, it's trying to give you more cells to better be able to nurture what it is that you're worried about or fighting for.
And I wanted to add, can I just, the one thing we haven't mentioned yet, and this is where it gets really fascinating, the body does not know whether something is literal or figurative, whether it's actual or metaphorical. The body is just getting the messaging. I'm worried about something related to my territory and I'm fighting for it. Body doesn't know the difference. You see, it's just going to adapt based on the messaging from the brain, which is why, you know, you can't, even though the body has this innate intelligence, it's really just responding to the captain up here that's feeding the information down to the workers down in the body. And the cells are the workers. The cells are in there saying, all right, got to do this, can't do this, take a rest, come back again. There's, you know, that's how I always like to explain it. So remember that too, whether it's imagined or real.
Just like the lemon example we did, you know, we did that. I can't remember if it was the stress or anxiety one, but, you know, just the thought of a lemon produced more saliva. You know, the lemon wasn't there, but the thought was. And the same thing is what Sonja's saying, that it can be a real or, you know, metaphorical. You know, the body doesn't know the difference, and the body doesn't, you know, the body doesn't lie either, but there's a reason for that adaptation. So if somebody has cancer in the breast glands, and that's what we would be looking for, why does your breast need to adapt that way? You know,
and to add to that, the breast cancer and the glands is in the stress phase. So the theme is you are running the theme, you are running the stressor at the time of the cancer, which because you'll see what we mean in a second when we start to talk about introductory or ductal cancers, because they are the opposite to that. So it means we're looking for what is currently going on in your life recently, or are you still carrying a lot of energy or an emotion around in relation to this particular theme?
Yeah. And that also means that then when your body switches into, when that relief moment happens, when the emotions or the conflict is resolved, or you're not in shock anymore, then the body can adapt in a different way. And that's when the cells then can break down. And this is why, it's really possible, and why it's so important to integrate. So, even when people are going through whatever treatment they decide, to address the root causes and anything emotional or stressful or shock moment that could be contributing to what's created it. Because if you do the healing on that as well, and have resolution there, then the cancer literally can naturally start to downgrade as well, especially if you have good microbiome, like Emma discussed in our last episode. If you've got the good microbes in the body that are there to help downgrade the tissue that's no longer there, then it's possible. And we're not saying it's always going to happen, but we're saying it's possible in the right conditions for this to happen. But it's integrating.
And when you understand this too, though, when you understand whether or not that cancer's in the stress phase or in the regeneration phase, it also explains why cancers come back despite the interventions of the chemos. Correct. Because if you're not dealing with that root cause, and you can cut the breast off or you can zap those cells will just come back if you're still running the stress, if you're still running that theme in your life, especially with this glandular breast cancer, that is going to show up. That potentially is why it comes back again, because at a deeper psyche level, the themes and the perceptions haven't been adjusted and changed. The emotions haven't been dealt with. And
it's subconsciously as well, because you could be in a state in your life where you consciously feel, like, that doesn't worry me anymore. But remember, the psyche takes a snapshot. It's an imprint that's sort of still running in the background somewhere. So if the symptoms are there, that means the energy's still there. So that's kind of still what needs to be addressed.
Yeah. And so the second type, are we ready to go on to the ducts?
Yeah.
So the ducts cancer is in terms of whether it's happening in the stress or whether it's happening in the regeneration phase. With the ducts, they are happening in the opposite, isn't it? They are happening where you'll see a cell increase when you're going through regeneration.
Yeah.
So you're going to say something?
Oh, no, I was just going to,
Yeah, okay. So the theme for ducts, is a separation conflict from a mate, child, the mother, home, nest, or experienced as if a loved one was torn from the breast. Yeah. So possible scenarios are an unexpected divorce, a breakup with a partner, or it could be the death of a child, couldn't it? Or
it could be the death of a loved one, like somebody that it's your role to nurture them, and you don't have that. You don't have that anymore. But it could equally be someone that you want to separate from. So that's why sometimes, if people have been through a painful separation, and or a nasty separation, and it's actually literally someone they want to separate from, or even the family home, sometimes they might want to get away from the home, or they don't want to be separated from the home, but it's literally what happens is the ducts in the breast, they widen. So in the stress phase, they widen to literally, if there was milk there, and this has got nothing to do with breastfeeding, it's just biology of the breast. So it could drain away what you don't need, because you don't need it anymore to nurture. And then what happens is during the relief moment, or when you're feeling better, or it's just not stressful anymore, the moment's over, the moment's past, that's when, so if the cells have had to widen and downgrade, they have to build back up again. And that's why often this cancer is found in the regeneration phase, which is actually the cell renewal phase. It's building up the cells. And it's also really, really important with these types of cancers that happen in the healing phase, why it's so important to address the issues from an emotional perspective and a beliefs perspective during the stress phase. Because if the stress isn't as big, the healing doesn't need to be as big. Because remember, the body's always trying to come back into balance. So if during the stress phase it's been really intense, then that means that healing is going to be more intense. Whereas or prolonged. So if we address the original stressors when people are going through it, then, and do the healing, whatever modality works for you, but do the stuff that really helps you accept, process, get over, and come to terms with your situations, and whatever beliefs might need to be reframed as well. Then the healing phase doesn't need to be as big, and so that means if it was a stage where it was breast cancer of the ducts, then that wouldn't need to be as intense.
And the other thing we need to consider too is, as much as some mammograms have helped save lives, they're also catching some of these breast cancers in the healing phase, being assumed to be progressive and a woman having their breasts removed, when actually if you were to allow the breast just to, if you check in with what's triggered the healing phase and understand that the woman has gone through a full resolution emotionally, you don't need to remove the breast, because what will eventually happen is those cells will increase, and then of their own volition they will then decrease, and you'll get a natural healing of the breast. And so sometimes we are catching some of these breast cancers too actually in the healing phase, because they have the person's dealt with the original trigger and trauma, and it's just as I've talked about with lymphatic cancer before, it's just the body doing what it needs to do. It's quite funny because I keep standing here trying to act like I'm touching my breast, but it's just the body going through that adaptation process. And when you understand whether this is a stress phase cancer or whether it's a healing phase cancer, then whether it's just the body allowing itself to do what it needs to do as part of the adaptation. And I just want to share that I've worked with a client with this type of cancer, with ducts, and the trauma was leaving her home in the UK. She'd have this beautiful like caravan home that she traveled around the country and having to leave it behind. And she described it as she cried. As soon as we found, she started crying. I said, I had to sell my baby. I had to say goodbye to my girl. That was her home.
And this one also I've found when with people, that this one happens a lot when people go, oh, but everything's good now. So I've
I don't get it.
known women that, oh, but that's over now. Now I've got a new love in my life. And it's like, well, yeah, or that's over now. Now I've got a new home. That's not part of my life anymore. And that's precisely sometimes when these healing cancers happen, because the relief moment's there. The body's now come back into balance, and that's how it's doing it. I just want to go back to what you just said though, Sonja, with understanding them. In the current climate that we live in, there's so much fear around cancer and people not looking at, well, why is it there in the first place, that it's really hard for people to do. They hear the word cancer and, the beliefs and perceptions that go along with that are often, oh shit, is this going to affect my life? Is this going to kill me? Does this mean death for me? Or, something along those lines. So it's very then hard for people to go, oh, if I've got the cancer in my breast, okay, are you telling me that there's a reason why that, I just need to wait? That's hard to do without the understanding and awareness that sometimes, or always, the cancers are there to, as a way for your body to come back into balance. And yes, there is sometimes for surgery, and there's also times for chemo, radiation, whatever people want to do. But what we're saying is, before you rush into anything, just have a look at and work with somebody that can help you understand, but why is it there in the first place? Why is my cells adapting this way? Because then it can help you have a much more integrative approach, and it might change your process. Sonja, you're working with a number of people that are dealing with cancers at the moment and integrating their approach and having some really fantastic results.
Well, that's what we were talking about before, Jodie. I have a client who had 4 types of cancer, life limiting as described by her oncologist, and was too sick for surgery, too sick to go in there and deal with removing part of her liver, dealing with removing part of the bowel. It was like, we're just going to zap this with chemo, and then we'll see what happens. But because this woman's gone fully integrated, 3 of those 4 cancers are pretty much, one of them's the lymphatics halved, the bowel cancer's gone, the lung cancer has calcified and is just thinning out, and the cells are just thinning out on the inside, and the liver's gone from multiple lesions to 1 lesion, and that was without surgery. Because when we know the cause and we're dealing with the symptom, the underlying triggers, the body can go into this. So she's being very fortunate in a way that it was so advanced that she couldn't have her organs removed. So, if it's, it's hard because the medical profession also don't see it from this perspective. So they can't understand. They just know we see a lot of cancer cells in that body right now. We have to get that organ out before it moves into another organ, which I don't know if we could finish with breast now and move into this whole sort of secondary cancer.
Yeah. And with lungs as well.
Yeah. So we'll talk about the fact that secondary cancers often occur because of the trauma of a diagnosis.
Yeah.
And the perception that a lot of cancers metastasize, I can never say that word, into other organs is actually not necessarily true. It's actually a secondary, because remember, the bigger the event can lead to the more severe of the symptoms, and why people often will die of not the cancer they got diagnosed with, but a secondary cancer. And those most common secondary cancers are lung, liver, and brain cancers. And we want to talk today about lung because it's important to understand the link between that and then the cause of lung from a perspective of that stressor thing. Otherwise, it's not just about smoking, by the way, is it?
And also any cancer, though, it does depend on location, because sometimes those cancers are, they are in places that are life-threatening. If they occur in a part of the brain that's affecting something, or, the lungs or the heart, the pancreas, like a life-threatening organ, there is a need sometimes for more radical treatment. But if your cancers are occurring in places that are not life-threatening today to do those treatments, then have a look at all the different ways that you can integrate. But even if they are in a place that's in a life-threatening organ and you do whatever treatment is right for you right now, always still look at what's the reason it's there in the first place and heal that as well. If you can, like if there's a way to, I guess, make peace with that reason as well, then that's what we would encourage people to do, because we're always looking at, but why is it there?
Yeah, exactly. So we're going to talk quickly. This is, I think, the last thing we're going to cover today is looking at, we've just briefly talked about secondary cancer, but we want to talk about lung cancer just because it is a very common secondary cancer, but it's also one of those ones I think is a really great example of why it's not just about the smoking, because if smoking was the cause of lung cancer, every smoker would get lung cancer. And it also doesn't explain why people who don't smoke get lung cancer. Yeah. So do you want to touch on the themes for lung cancer, Jodie?
Yeah. So if we think about, I guess, what do we have lungs for, is to help us breathe. And there are several tissues within the lungs. So if you have symptoms, we'd always look at, what part of the lungs relates to that symptom. So asthma, for example, that's the bronchial tubes. But what we're going to look at right now is the lung alveoli, which is the air sacs in the lungs. And so when somebody has lung cancer and there's tissues building up like throughout the lungs, either in one, you hear lots of people with scattered tumours within the lungs. But the reason what we're looking for really there is a death fright conflict. So a fear of death, fear of I'm not going to be able to breathe. And so and why Sonja's talking about secondary cancers, why this can often be there, is because there's so much fear around the word cancer that often when people get a diagnosis, that's where the mind goes of, oh my gosh, am I going to die? And of course, if you're thinking, shit, am I going to die? Then you're not going to be able to breathe anymore. So that's why breath gives us life. So that's why often what can really trigger that stress and that conflict to make the cells in the lungs adapt and build up, because what it's actually trying to do is better help you breathe. But the problem happens is because it's prolonged, it goes on, the stresses aren't dealt with, is the tumors get bigger. And then they become a problem. They inhibit the breathing. But that's why it's so important to be able to work with any emotional stress that might be going along with the trauma of diagnosis. And just the beliefs about cancer in general.
And that's why, one of the things Jodie and I were talking about before is the first thing I do, and this is why integration is so powerful. The first thing I do when I get a client come to me with cancer is I have to deal with I will work on clearing the trauma of the diagnosis first. first and foremost, what did you make it mean at that moment? What are you deciding about this illness? Because that will determine, and it's a perfect example is with quite a few of my clients that have overcome their cancers, or have, you know, gone into some sort of cancer, like cell reduction to the point of not, you know, being evident, because we can't really call it remission until it's been quite a few months or years, is they asked for no prognosis.
Yeah, I love that.
Because when you don't have that installed belief of, well, oh, you know, you see all the time, oh, 6 weeks and they die in 6 weeks, or 3 months. Then if you know, I've got a friend whose father was diagnosed 11 and a half years ago with a skin cancer that he was told he had 6 months to live. It's 11 and a half years later. And he just deceived. He said, oh, no, I'll worry about that later. He was a real stalwart. But again, it's that moment of, you know, dealing with the trauma of the diagnosis. What did you make it mean? What are you deciding? Because if we can shift those beliefs and create a new perception and create hope for you and change that conversation, because that conversation and that energy and that feeling, and we talked about this in episode 1, and that emotion that you attach to the cancer will actually determine how fast you can go into potential healing of that cancer.
Yeah.
And it's about clearing that stressor, because that's just, you know, those secondary traumas and I'm going to die.
It's also what's making the cells adapt.
Yeah.
You know, what's making the body react. So, you know, and, you know, there's other causes as well. And there's some, you know, there are some cancers that, you know, are there for different, you know, other reasons. But if the adaptation's there, then we look for all the possible causes. And from an emotions and a beliefs perspective, that's what we'd be looking for.
Yeah. And I don't think we've even talked about, and just quickly add this is all based on the study of meta health, which looks at the brain layers, the study of embryology, how the brain is developed through when we're in utero, and how each of those brain layers is more complex in its functioning, and each of those complexities are related to the organs and tissues in their layers. So it's a really honed in scientific approach. It's not like, you almost can't make mistakes with it, can we? You know, when someone comes to us with a diagnosis.
Yeah,
it's very specific.
And whether you believe in beliefs or emotions or the mind-body connection or not, it doesn't matter, because most people, all of us can understand, and doctors will tell you this, it's your brain that's directing the body tissue what to do. You know, when people are on life support and they're pronounced brain dead, it's the brain is no longer sending messages to the body, so the body's not working. So we can all relate to the fact the brain is what sends messages to the body. And so everything that we're talking about is based on that. So that part of the brain is sending the message to that part of the body, causing the adaptation. So we look at, okay, what's causing the brain to send that message to that tissue? And from a beliefs perspective and the energy and the stress that around that specific thing is, you know, how you can, I guess, change the process in a very different way. Yeah.
So I think that's it. I think we've covered everything today. Yeah, we went a little bit more in depth in this one today, but I think it's really good to get examples. And you know, I had a client, I just mentioned, I had a client with lung cancer, and it's pretty much.
Yeah, because it's possible. And you know, we're not saying that. We never use the word cure either, and we never say that, hey, you can. We're not promising any results for people, but what we're really saying is, when you've got these symptoms in your body, they're not random. They're not coming from nowhere. So when we say integrate, we mean do a lifestyle audit. You know, what to do about it is do a lifestyle audit. Have a look about, you know, what are my stressors? What could I change? What is making this happen in my body in the first place? And integrate different practices. Where, you know, your medical treatment, your emotional healing, whatever you need to do to work on your beliefs, that anything that is creating that message from your brain to your body, integrate that.
Yeah.
And, you know, the last one is obviously then decide, well, what do I want?
Yeah.
All right, this is my diagnosis, but what do I want to decide my own prognosis. Because remember, when someone gives you a prognosis, that's just their opinion based on results of other people. Now, those people are not you.
Yeah.
So, and Sonja, you've had it with your own clients, honey, where they've decided their own prognosis and they're the ones that get the results. So you get to decide, yep, this is where I'm at, but where do I want to go? What do I want this and think about what's possible here. And that's where, you know, using your approaches and changing the message that's going to the cell, and you know, meditation and, you know, matrix reimprinting and, you know, all those things are incredible. And I don't mean meditation for relaxation. I mean like meditation as in, let's create the neural pathways to start to create the message that's going from the brain to the body of what I want my cells to look like and be like. Yeah.
And look,
mental rehearsal, I guess, is a better way to say it.
Yeah.
Like an athlete would for winning gold.
Yeah,
you know,
exactly.
But in this case, we're doing it for healing the body.
We are. And the power of the mind, you know, we can, whatever's been created in the emotional field can be uncreated. And that's what this is all about. So now, just a little insight. Our next webinar is going to be all about allergies and hay fever, because it's a very common one, and we want to share that. So very exciting. Yeah. So on that note, everyone who's tuned in and watched, we're super grateful. Please share this information. The more people who know about it, the more people we can help.
Yeah, and we just hope that in some way this might help open your eyes, or just be open to the possibilities of what's possible if we look for, okay, why do we have these symptoms in the first place? And just remember, when I really want to make sure everyone who's listening understands this, we're not saying if you've been through the events that Sonja and I spoke about that's going to result in breast cancer or lung cancer. Because remember, your perception is everything, and what that event means to you, and the stress around the event and what it means to you. But we are saying, if these symptoms are there, then we can backtrack and we could look at, okay, what could be the potential stressors there, and work with it that way. But equally, if you know you're going through different stressors, and you know you don't want it to get to be something bigger, then you know, work on your emotional stuff too.
Yeah, 100%. And on that note, love and light.
Yeah, lots of love. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Thanks for watching.